today we have Zakrya Rana presenting on men's mental health stigma today. Zakrya Rana is a lifelong New Jersey native with a bachelor's degree in public health. His journey started in undergrad at Rutgers University, where he majored in public health. During his undergraduate studies, Zach completed 2 internships that tremendously exposed him to a multitude of diverse facets that comprise the community. His first internship was at the Edison Department of Health and Human Services as a health inspector trainee, where he worked firsthand with various businesses, store owners, school staff, and other government entities. Zach's second internship was at the Edison Police Department within the Detectives Bureau as a Bureau of Criminal Investigation intern. The second internship was where Zach realized his passion for serving the community and working with underserved populations. He's known for being laid back, open-minded, and loves having a great conversation. In his free time, he loves to work out, play video games, and spend time with his family and friends. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Zach Rana for his presentation.
All right, everyone, welcome to today's topic, breaking the silent stigma of men's mental health challenges. My name is Zakrya Rana, and I am a prevention consultant with NJ4S Union Hub, which is managed by Prevention Links. A little bit about us. We are New Jersey statewide student support services NJ4S Union County Hub, which is managed by Prevention Links, and we are dedicated to addressing the youth mental health crisis. We basically want to provide a pillar of support for the community. An overview of today's agenda. First, we're going to get into gender identity and gender roles, and then the implications of gender identity and gender roles. Followed by that, we're going to get into some of the historical and modern perspectives on gender identity and gender roles. After that, we're going to get into some toxic masculinity, a discussion on statistics, prevalence, seeking help, strategies, suicide, finishing off with intersectionality, positive masculinity, and media portrayals. First things first, gender identity and gender roles are dynamic, they're fluid, they're ever-changing, and they're on a spectrum. They're not concrete. Let's start this video.
Okay, so we have to get you a sword, a shield, blue pants. Oh, and I can give you the mustache I wore last Halloween. Oh, come on. So what if you didn't get the role of the princess? Being a knight is awesome. At least you're not playing a tree. Gender role stereotypes are when a person is expected to act in a certain way based on society's expectations related to their gender. Traditional gender roles go back to a time when there were clear and, at times, unequal rules about how people were expected to act based on their gender. People who were born male were expected to be strong and aggressive, not emotional, and, of course, to love sports. People who were born female were expected to be kind and nurturing, emotional, and domestic, meaning they were all supposed to be able to cook and clean. Gender role stereotypes also affect people's understanding of who is beautiful and who is not. People still go to great lengths to try and conform to these unrealistic ideals they see in popular media. They diet, obsessively exercise, and go through plastic surgery. Additionally, strict stereotypes about gender police people's emotions. Girls are not expected to show anger, and boys aren't supposed to be empathetic, nurturing, or vulnerable. Luckily, as times have changed, so have people's expectations about gender roles. More and more people are free to behave in ways that are true to who they really are, and that is a good thing.
Until next time, don't forget to visit me at amaze.org or go to my YouTube channel to watch more. Bye!
Okay, continuing on. So, societies have set expectations about how men and women should dress, behave, and present themselves. Gender roles in society means how we're expected to act, speak, dress, groom, and conduct ourselves based upon our assigned sex. For example, girls and women are generally expected to dress in typically feminine ways, be polite, accommodating, and nurturing. Men are generally expected to be strong, aggressive, and bold. Every society, ethnic group, and culture has gender role expectations, but they can be very different from group to group. They can also change in the same society over time. Pink used to be considered a masculine color in the US, while blue was considered feminine. It's affected by sociocultural norms and values. We have been living in a historically patriarchal societal framework, and men play a role in every individual's life. They are fathers, brothers, sons, uncles, co-workers, significant others. Therefore, it makes it crucial for everyone to know how to navigate these aspects of everyday life.
I see a backlash against masculinity and a sense that there's something toxic about
but
masculinity.
What is this idea of being
such.
why is society overly feminized?
Well, I didn't ever say that society was overly feminized. So if we're going to discuss my views, we should use my actual words. I believe that there's a danger in our society at the moment of making the assumption that our culture, for example, is a tyrannical patriarchy, which it is in some small part, and that any active engagement on the part of young men in particular is indistinguishable from an unacceptable power and dominance drive, which I don't believe.
But surely
all of that is inappropriate and incorrect.
If much of the power and authority over a very long historical period has lain with men, isn't it only inevitable that some men will get a little hacked off when women are given a stab at something approaching equality?
Well, that could be inevitable, but that doesn't make it right, and it's certainly not something that I support. So
So you think men's resentment is more important than women's effort to attain equality?
I'm not in favor of resentment at all. I think that if you're resentful, something's definitely wrong. Either you need to grow the hell up and take stock of your life, or you have some things to say to people that you haven't been saying.
You say science undoubtedly shows us that men and women have different traits, and there's a lot of science to back you up on that. But you say that because of that, men are hardwired to achieve success and to be successful in a way that women are not.
No, not at all. I've never said anything like that. I've said that there are biological differences between men and women that express themselves in temperament and in occupational choice, and that any attempt to enforce equality of outcome is unwarranted and ill-advised as a consequence.
And yet some of the most successful societies, judged on contentment indices or indeed material success, are those, for example, in Scandinavia.
Where the temperamental differences between men and women are larger than they are in any other society.
Well, so you point out that in Scandinavia, many more women choose to be health workers than engineers, for example.
It's not what I say, it's what the large-scale scientific investigation has revealed.
Fair enough. But equally, Scandinavia is full of societies, one could point to Norway, where they've made a specific legislative effort, for example, with a quota of 40% of women on corporate boards or a quota for women to be in parliament. Right. They've specifically engaged in social engineering, and it seems to be working, and it seems to
doesn't seem to be working.
Well, forgive me, but Norway is top of every contentment index that we see across the world.
Well, okay, so first of all, Norway has plenty of oil money, which is definitely contributing to that. And second, it depends on what you mean by working. There's no evidence, for example, that the legislation that was designed to increase the number of women on boards has produced any movement whatsoever in the number of women who hold managerial and administrative positions in Norway. The theory was that as societies became more egalitarian, that men and women would become more the same. But that isn't what's happened. What's happened is the biggest differences between men and women now, temperamentally and in terms of their own interest, have manifested themselves in the Scandinavian countries. And so what that will mean is that men and women will make different choices in occupation if you let them have free choice. Now, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to stop that from happening? Is that the feminist perspective?
Let's get back to a word I used before and ask you directly. Do you approve of, do you think it's a dangerous word, equality? This word equality.
I approve of equality of opportunity, but I think that equality of outcome considerations are detestable and dangerous beyond belief.
Okay, so obviously there is a big debate on gender identity and gender roles, but a theme in today's presentation is I've included questionable role models, questionable male role models, because of the ideas that they speak on in today's society and how that affects the men that follow them. And so you just saw an example of that, and there will be two more examples of those kinds of men in today's society in the remainder of this presentation. Moving forward, what is stigma? A stigma is a set of negative and often unfair beliefs that a society or group of people have about something. The stigma associated with mental illness, for instance, is the stigma of mental illness. The stigma of being poor, for instance, is the stigma of poverty. Stigma can be complex and prevalent. Mental health-related stigma is an umbrella term that includes social and public stigma. self-stigma, which is perceived, professional stigma, which is in the workplace or by healthcare providers, and cultural stigma. Social stigma refers to the negative attitudes toward and disapproval of a person experiencing mental health illness rooted in misperception based on a person having a weak character. The implications of stigma: these perceptions can lead to discrimination, avoidance, and rejection. Self-stigma is the internalization of social stigma in that the person with the mental illness feels shame about his or her symptoms. Professional stigma assumes that health professionals transfer and reinforce stigmatization of their clients, while cultural stigma comprises the various ways that individual cultures interpret mental illness. The historical perspectives: first we had the hunter-gatherer theories. Historically, mental illness has been associated with women, ancient Greek medicine, and uterine notions of hysteria. Men have always experienced symptoms related to psychological distress. The preoccupation with women has not only led to pejorative associations about the irrational female, but also to the neglect of male patterns of mental disorder. And here we have, once again, this guy.
The West is fundamentally best characterized as an oppressive patriarchy, which is absolutely absurd proposition, and that as a consequence, whatever actions they might take that are forthright and ambitious in terms of participating in that system are by the very nature of the system destructive. It's very difficult for me to understand how anybody can be properly motivated if that's the fundamental view of society and male participation in it. And I don't buy any of that. I think the idea that the West is fundamentally an oppressive patriarchy is an appalling idea, and the notion that the proper way to view history is as a battleground between ethnic identities or identities in general, or between men and women, it borders on the pathological. And so maybe it exceeds just merely bordering on the pathological.
The worst violence, can be the violence of the mind. And I think men today in our society are told, virtually from their young age to now, when they grow up, that they're doing the wrong thing, that they have done the wrong thing historically, that there's no place for them. And I think that's what Jordan speaks to a lot of young men. And look, I'm a father of 3 young boys under 5, and reading a lot of Jordan Peterson's works through the book, I can understand why it resonates with a lot of people, because men today have lost their identity, and I think feminism has become a movement to overtake masculinity, and
I'm a feminist. I don't want that.
Well, sure
I don't hate men. I'm not trying to destroy men. Alex, that's ridiculous.
Let's look at the empirical evidence. Let's look at the empirical in our schools. It's boys who are falling behind now, actually, in primary schools. It's boys who are falling behind at universities. It's young men who are suffering and have the worst mental impacts. It's the highest rates of youth suicide. It's a serious issue, and I think the question is right. I mean, yes, there's a lot of disenfranchisement in the world, but there are movements persecuting men in today's world.
It's almost as though we're talking about a structural issue and you're talking about a personal issue, and people who take personally the idea that we need to change structures, I think are misreading what the complaint is that people have. And so for me, the problem that I have with kind of structural rigidity of gender roles for men and women is that they hurt men and they hurt women. They hurt both. They hurt the men who want to stay home longer with their kids. They hurt men in real physical ways, because we do have a problem in this country where women are more likely to be the victims of violence at home. Men are more likely to be the victims of violence in public. But in both, the common factor is it's men committing the violence by and large, not exclusively, but by and large. And so these rigid kind of ideas of masculinity hurt everyone. And so when we talk about feminism, when we talk about changing those structures, it's to create an equality for the benefit of everyone and to get rid of some of the things that hold everyone back.
The fundamental truth we need to grasp here is that men are not oppressed because they're men. Men will be oppressed in their lives for all kinds of different reasons. They might be oppressed because they're working class. They might be oppressed because of their ethnicity or their religion or their age or their sexuality or their ability status. But at no point in human history have all men been judged, oppressed, disenfranchised, kicked out of institutions on behalf of their maleness. That just has not happened.
All right, moving on. Sorry. Okay, so the modern perspectives. The prevailing biomedical approach to mental illness underplays the role of environmental and social factors in maintaining mental health in ways that particularly impact upon men. Men have been socialized to inhibit displays of emotion, and many believe that seeking help for psychological distress connotes weakness and not coping. Physicians often fail to treat men's mental health issues effectively. Better training and empathy for the distinct symptoms and societal expectations men face can help. Male practitioners can model vulnerability, emotional expression, and openness for their male clients. Female practitioners can model these same behaviors and encourage exploration of feelings previously viewed as problematic. It's important to help them challenge the ideas taught to them in their youth without demonizing those that taught them those hurtful lessons in the first place. We need to stop propagating stigmas surrounding mental health and encouraging men to seek help. Help them find their identity and meaning in life that doesn't involve silently carrying the burden of mental illness. And traditional societal definitions on manhood just don't make sense. So now, toxic masculinity, what is it? It's a term used to describe harmfully and socially destructive aspects of masculinity. These include misogyny, homophobia, violent domination. It's a set of social guidelines and attitudes that are often associated with manliness and can negatively impact men, women, and society. Some facts about toxic masculinity is that it's bad for both men and women. It leads to these concepts such as alpha male and sigma male mentality, meninism, the manosphere, and mansplaining, for instance. And this results usually from echo chambers, mob mentality, and groupthink. And an example of toxic masculinity is locker room talk, for instance. Now we have a video.
You've responded to her tweet.
Yeah, she's a liar.
But where is the line for you between masculinity, which I will always defend, and which I agree with? I think a lot of women like men to be masculine, and what has become known as toxic masculinity. And the reason I ask you is that you are engaged in that debate with men all the time. Where is the line for you where men shouldn't cross, where the behavior should be kept within a line?
Please define toxic masculinity.
Well, you tell me what you think it crosses a line from being a masculine, good man to a bad man.
There's no such thing as too much masculinity if it's genuinely masculine. Genuine masculinity is not out here to hurt people. It's absolutely the opposite. It's out here to protect. And when bad things happen, they call traditionally masculine men. If you need a firefighter, you need a masculine man. When you call the police because of the problem you have, you want masculine men. And as soon as a woman or a man is in trouble, when you look for backup, you look for masculine men. And masculine men have a duty to provide and protect those they care about. We have a duty to do things we don't feel like doing because we know we're supposed to do them. And that's why we stayed in the Titanic and died. Those were masculine men.
Where did you get your views about this from?
This is what I grew up with. It's the family I grew up around. And
your father, your mother?
Yeah, and the world I lived in. And I think a lot of the things I'm saying now about masculinity and how people should act in the world, how the world should function, were considered completely normal and accepted by everybody only 20 years ago. I think the world's just lost its mind. For me to stand up and say a man should protect a woman now gets to be called a misogynist and canceled. If I said that 10 years ago, everyone would say, duh. And what's funny is, everyone who argues against me and says men shouldn't protect women, especially all the feminists, if they were with their boyfriend and a man broke into their house, guess who they'd expect to go downstairs? Who do you think? Think they go themselves? Are they going to Afghanistan? No, we send men to do these things. So
well, we send women in the armed forces too.
You have to generalize when you make points.
There are many courageous people.
Exceptions do not disprove the rule.
No, but you've got to concede there are many courageous women serving in the armed forces.
Absolutely and utterly, completely correct. But by and large, traditionally, soldiers are men. Exceptions do not disprove the rule.
Well, it's not an exception. It's a fact that there are a lot of women now in the armed forces.
Correct. But if you were to take the average soldier, they are a male. If you're allowed to say who's a male and who isn't nowadays, I'm assuming their gender, I apologize. If you were to take the average soldier, they're a male, which means that exceptions are the female soldiers, which because there's a lower percent of them, a lower probability. Exceptions do not disprove the rules. Men do the fighting. Right now in Ukraine, men cannot leave. Women are allowed to leave because men have to fight in the front line and women are allowed to go to Dubai. That is how it is.
What do you say to young men who come to you for advice, who feel lost, who don't really know where they fit into society?
I say that life as a man is exceptionally difficult. I say the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing about being a man is you're born without value. Society doesn't care about you. You're only going to be cared about based on how useful you are. You have the chance to build yourself up and become a superhero if you're prepared to do the hard work and be indefatigable enough to never quit. But if you're going to stand around and wait for a handout, nobody's going to ever respect you. And I think that a lot of people have forgotten about how difficult and how competitive it is as a man. We're always in constant competition with each other. And it's your duty as a man to stand up and say, I want to be as important and strong and good-hearted and God fearing is possible, and I need to work hard to achieve those things.
Dame Sheila Hancock says we've become too over-emotional as a society, crying too much about everything. Has she got a point?
She's completely right. And the dangerous thing about overly emotional men is that they're dangerous. They're genuinely dangerous. This is what's crazy. All these people who talk about toxic masculinity and how bad it is for men to be traditionally masculine. A traditionally masculine man does things he doesn't feel like doing because it is his duty to do them. He charges into the building because it is his duty. Not because he feels like it, because it is his duty. We're now teaching the new generation of men that they don't have duty and they can just act on their feelings and act how they feel, and they don't have to act as a man should. Do you know what happens when you get men who just act how they feel? You get school shooters, you get violence, you get rapists. Men who do not control their emotions are dangerous. If you find a man who is stoic, he's not gonna hurt people. He's gonna sit and think about his actions very carefully, and he's gonna be a good man who protects and provides for his family. You find a man who just acts out on impulse and does whatever he feels like, you're gonna find a dangerous man. Sitting here telling men to cry more and act with their feelings and it's okay to feel this way, that way, etc., and have no self-control. That is why we have the problems we have in the world. Absolutely and utterly wrong. So when they talk about toxic masculinity, they have it completely inversed on its head, completely and utterly wrong. We need to be teaching stoicism. We need to be teaching young men to understand that the world is very, very difficult. It's hard to be a man. You're gonna feel bad sometimes. You just suck it up and perform anyway. Not to sit there and cry your eyes out or blame other people.
Tough
or
being a
cough
woman
out.
too in modern society.
It's certainly tough being a woman, but I'm not a woman, so why would I speak on issues I do not understand? I'm a man.
You can feel an empathy for women.
I feel empathy, certainly, but I do not understand their issues.
See, a lot of men come up to me and they admire you. I've got to say, a lot of women I've spoken to don't admire. They think you represent.
So clearly, questionable male role models are rampant in today's society. With that being said, let's get into the statistics. Depression and suicide are ranked as a leading cause of death among men. 6 million men are affected by depression in the United States every single year. Men, 79% of 38,364 die by suicide at a rate 4 times higher than women. So a question I wanted to ask everyone is, why are men's suicide rates higher than that of women? Does anyone know? Does anyone want to try to answer that?
Yeah, I don't know if I could answer that. I find this so interesting, but the whole presentation. But I think that the rate is because men usually, they're like expected to be stronger, right? And they are expected to be able to take everything. And like the crazy guy that was speaking right there in the video, you know, how they're supposed to be the defenders, the providers and all that. And then they have no feelings, and that is heavy, right? It's a burden for them. And I would think that would be one of the main reasons why those rates are so high on men. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
So you're correct. Jennifer said men really suffer in silence. That's also correct. The thing is that it's more tangible of a reason why men's suicide rates are higher. And that reason is, yes, access to firearms. Jonathan said it. I'm going to get into that in the next slide. But more women attempt suicide than men, but more men complete suicide because of their resort to lethal methods of attempting suicide. So they also die due to alcohol-related causes at 62,000 in comparison to women at 26,000. Men are also 2 to 3 times more likely to misuse drugs than women. Sure, but it's not going to. Okay. Suicide amongst men, access to means, exactly what we just talked about. In the past, in the US, 6 in 10 gun owners are men. Firearms account for more than half of suicides. Elevated rates, disproportionately high rates. There's clearly a health outcomes disparity that needs to be addressed. We need to explore the contributing factors, which is stigma, social isolation, and untreated mental illness. Some strategies for prevention. We need to have an intervention targeting men. There should be awareness campaigns, crisis hotlines, and mental health support services. Prevalence factors, we have societal expectations that consist of the traditional masculinity and mental health, which is the pressure to be stoic and self-reliant. There are biological differences, and there's differences in access to healthcare. The impact of stigma on help-seeking behaviors. Stigma discourages men from seeking help. It results in delayed treatment and negative health outcomes. Some strategies for reducing stigma. Promoting help-seeking behavior among men is the key way, and there should be education, awareness campaigns, and advocacy efforts. Now, really important part of men's mental health is intersectionality. Intersectionality is you consider how factors such as race, ethnicity, sexuality, and socioeconomic status intersect with gender to influence men's experiences of mental health stigma, treatment access, and outcomes. And in addressing intersectionality, it's important to consider intersectionality in these areas, mental health research, policy, and practice, so that you can ensure inclusivity and equity. Positive masculinity and mental health. So the promotion of positive masculinity is important because it's important to redefine what masculinity means. There should be the inclusion of emotional expression, vulnerability, and seeking help when needed in that definition of positive masculinity. Initiatives and programs should promote positive masculinity and support men's mental health. There should be mentorship programs, men's groups, and community-based interventions. In a nutshell, positive masculinity is a way of thinking and behaving that emphasizes the positive aspects of traditional masculinity. These include strength, courage, intelligence, but you want to avoid the negative aspects like aggression and violence. There's no single way to express masculinity, and it's difficult to define sometimes because it's influenced by a variety of factors. But some terms that are used to describe positive masculinity include healthy, pro-social, adaptive, and socially responsible. Now we're going to get into some of the media portrayals of men and mental health. We should be looking at the depictions in social media, film and television, music, and popular culture, and we should analyze the following things in these depictions: the stereotypes, the stigmatization, and the portrayals of help-seeking behavior. And it's imperative to counter these depictions with media literacy, responsible reporting, and media advocacy that challenges these depicted stereotypes and promote actual representations. And now we're going to do a clip from this show.
Anxiety attacks are legitimate psychiatric emergencies. Suppose you were driving and you passed out.
Let me tell you something. Nowadays, everybody's got to go to shrinks and counselors and go on Sally Jesse Raphael and talk about their problems. Whatever happened to Gary Cooper, the strong, silent type? That was an American. He wasn't in touch with his feelings. He just did what he had to do. See, what they didn't know was once they got Gary Cooper in touch with his feelings, that they wouldn't be able to shut him up. And then it's dysfunction this, and dysfunction that, and dysfunction malfungo.
You have strong feelings about this.
Let me tell you something. I had a semester and a half for college, so I understand Freud. I understand therapy as a concept. But in my world, it does not go down. Could I be happier? Yeah. Who couldn't?
Do you feel depressed? Do you feel depressed?
Since the ducks left, I guess.
Okay, so over here we saw how it was so difficult for him to admit that he was depressed. It's so difficult for him to get this help in this therapy session and admit to his problems or get in touch with his feelings. He even references Gary Cooper, this actor, about being the strong and silent type and how that's like a real American. Just all these like misconceptions and weird things that don't constitute seeking help or actually they display the stigma of men's mental health accurately in this video clip. So to recap today's key points, gender identity and gender roles constantly change. Stigma is bad and can have negative consequences. Historical perspectives and ideas about masculinity vary. Toxic masculinity exists and is bad for everyone. Men have disproportionately higher rates of suicide than women. Intersectionality affects men's mental health. We should challenge depictions of men's mental health in media, and we should promote positive masculinity. We should do this through raising awareness by reducing stigma and supporting men's mental health in their communities. We should have an ongoing dialogue, engage in advocacy, and collaborate in promoting positive outcomes.
We want to thank everyone for joining us today. And if you would like, and if you enjoyed today's presentation and want to keep up more with what NJ4S Union Hub is doing, you can follow us on social media at NJ4S Union. And if you have any questions about our programming, you can email us at NJ4S union@preventionlinks.org. Thank you again, everybody, for participating in this webinar, and we hope you have a great day.